Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
Hey everyone, it's Kimberly Bouchard. I'm the author of the Positively Disney Cookbook, and you are listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock Podcast, where you hear the stories behind the adventures. With your hosts, Aljon Go and Dave Bossert.
Welcome to Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, music, as well as what's streaming in theaters. My name's Aljon Go, musician, longtime Disney, Star Wars, and Marvel fan and pop culturist. And you can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, author, and welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com. Aljon, how are you?
I'm good. We're having a good weekend. The fall seems to be in full swing. The kids are in school.
Not here. It's an inferno out here in Southern California. And hopefully it's going to break this coming week. But, you know, Aljon, we've got a great show. We've got story artist and director Steve Anderson. And I should say author Steve Anderson, because he has a new book coming out, Disney In Between. Now, for our listeners, I said last week we had Bob Weiss coming on. I misspoke because Bob Weiss is actually coming on next week. Oh. So this week we have story artist and director Steve Anderson, and he's going to be talking about his new book, Disney In Between, The Lost Years, 1966 to 1986. Aljon, this is an incredible book because it really writes about a section, Steve writes about a section of Disney history that's really not touched on very often, and some people refer to it as Disney's dark ages, that 20-year period from the time Walt passed away to the resurgence of the studio under Eisner and Wells and Katzenberg and Roy E. Disney, of course. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And again, to our listeners, my apologies for misspeaking last week, but next week we do have Bob Weiss, the former president of Walt Disney Imagineering and author of 2 new books this fall. He's going to be on speaking about his books. So that's what we have going on. It's been, a lot of stuff happening, Aljon.
There have been, and it's great. It's great to be busy, and it's great to have all these spectacular guests on the show. And I'll say that Steve Anderson, man, what a guy of so many talents, not only just an amazing, talented director and artist, but now author. And I can't wait to dig in. This period has long eluded a lot of Disney fans. There's not a whole lot out there about it. So I'm glad that he's doing a deep dive for us fans to dig into.
Yeah. And by the way, Steve's book officially releases tomorrow, Tuesday, September 10th, and it starts shipping. And from what I'm hearing, it's flying off the shelves. So that's a really cool thing.
It's a must read for any Disney fan. I was able to get an advanced copy of it, and I have to say that I love it. I think our listeners will too. So I can't wait to dive in here with Steve.
And the other thing I want to mention, and I'm going to keep mentioning this at least this week, the Time Machine and Puppetoon screening at the Fine Art Theater on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills is Saturday, October 5th. There's 2 shows. There's a matinee at 2 p.m. and there's an evening show at 8 p.m. You can get your tickets at sci-fi.biz, and Aljon's going to have that in the show notes. And we're going to keep mentioning that because our friend Arnold Leibovitz is the guy that's put this together. This is a restored version of the Time Machine and a restored version of a number of Puppetoon cartoons. So I'm very excited about this, and I wish I could be there, but I'll be traveling on October 5th. So, I want our listeners to know when these types of screenings come about, you should really jump at the opportunity, because it's nothing better than to see these films in a theater, because they were made to be seen in a theater. And the Fine Art Theater is one of these beautiful, restored movie houses in Los Angeles. So check it out.
Nice. Hey, by the way, I can't wait to hear back from Arnie about that event, though. That should be amazing. Yeah. We'll say this. We do have
Skull Rock Podcast answers your email.
By the way, on YouTube now, of course, our new YouTube channel is up. We do have a couple new subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing to us. And we have a comment from Handsome Lover Boy 8818. He says, this is regarding our episode with Brett Iwan from The Vault, which Brett Iwan, of course, is a great artist and the voice of Mickey Mouse currently. He's been working that voice for 15 years. I know it's hard to believe, Handsome Lover Boy, that Brett has been doing that voice for so long. But man, he's doing a great job, and we love Brett Iwan here on the show. Another comment, Murph's Models says, love your podcast all the way over here in London. Keep up the great work. And this is in regards to our show recently with Ken Bruce, where he's talking about his work with Pixar and Ren and Stimpy. Of course, you and Ken have that shared work there, working on Ren and Stimpy, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
Ken's a great guy.
Absolutely.
And a fabulous book he wrote, you know, When the Birds Sang.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just another great book. Usually right before the holiday season, we will probably end up doing a recap of a lot of the books that you need to pick up for the holiday season, and his is definitely on that list. So once again, feel free to write us those emails, make comments on our YouTube and our Facebook page, and we'll read them here in an upcoming episode. And once again, don't be shy. Let us know how you really feel. Why don't you? Oh, hey, I forgot the sound effect.
Yeah, there you go.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I haven't found the reel yet, but I'm working on it, Dave. I want to make sure that I make you happy. I'm going to find the little movie screening reel, but it is our picks of the week. And what have we been streaming or seeing in the theaters, Dave? Let's start with you.
Well, Aljon, I got to see Beetlejuice this weekend in IMAX. This picks up after the original Beetlejuice 36 years ago. So we are picking up with 3 generations of the Dietz family who return home to Winter River after an unexpected family tragedy. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life soon gets turned upside down when her rebellious teenage daughter discovers a mysterious portal to the afterlife. When someone says Beetlejuice's name 3 times, the mischievous demon gleefully returns to unleash his very own brand of mayhem. All I could say, Aljon, is I really enjoyed this movie. I saw it with a friend, and, I would say I'd give this a B+. In my book, my friend felt it was a C in his book, but he's overly critical in my mind. I actually really enjoyed the film, even though there's some story issues with it. It feels a bit overstuffed on the story front, but I think Michael Keaton comes back and reprises his role as Beetlejuice masterfully and seamlessly, really. And I love the fact that Tim uses stop motion animation in the film. It certainly is Burton-esque. If you like Tim Burton's style, there's plenty of that in this film. And I laughed out loud at aspects of it. I thought some of the practical effects, some of the audio animatronic puppets and things were very well done. Really enjoyed that. Willem Dafoe, who plays Wolf Jackson, a TV, he's like a TV detective who gets, who's in the afterlife. He was in his real life, he was a TV star called Wolf Jackson. So Willem Dafoe is terrific, as always. Monica Bellucci, who plays Dolores, who's kind of the villain, if you will, in the film, is great. Danny DeVito has a small role, but Danny DeVito's always great on screen. Jenna Ortega plays, Winona Ryder's Lydia character's daughter, who's the 3rd generation. It's just absolutely fabulous. Catherine O'Hara's always great. There's so many great moments in this movie. I recommend it. I thought it was well done. I will say that on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 77%. IMDb has 7.2 out of 10. And Metacritic has it at 62%. But 89% of the audience liked this movie. So I go with the audience.
Well, they certainly are voting with their wallets. We'll talk about that here in the news section. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. On the small screen, I watched Time Bandits, the television series on Apple TV, which stars Lisa Kudrow, Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi.
Thank you.
Waititi, yeah.
Jermaine Clement. It's just got a terrific cast of characters, and unpredictable journey through time and space with a ragtag group of thieves and their new recruit, an 11-year-old history buff named Kevin. Together, they set out on a thrilling quest to save the boy's parents and the world. It's based on characters created by Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin in the original Time Bandits movie, if you remember that, which I thought was really terrific. They did, I think, a very good job on doing this series. Each episode really moves the story along. I found it very enjoyable. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 78%, IMDb 6.1 out of 10, and 56% liked this TV show. I liked it. I mean, I'd recommend people watch it. It was just kind of fun and wacky and crazy, and it kind of has the flavor of the Monty Python movies. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I also watched a docu-series on Max, HBO Max, or Max, the streaming network, called Chimp Crazy.
Okay.
And this is train wreck you can't look away from.
Oh boy.
This is about a former nurse turned exotic animal broker, Tanya Haddock, spends her days caring for animals in captivity, referring to herself as the Dolly Parton of chimps. However, her limitless love for one of the chimpanzees spins into a wild cat and mouse game with authorities and an animal rights group. Through the experiences of Tanya and other chimp moms, Chimp Crazy is a series that reveals the bonds between owners and their highly intelligent great ape pets, as well as the risks to the welfare of the animals themselves.
Time out.
Yeah.
Is this Tiger King all over again?
Yes, this is like Tiger King. I'll put it to you that way. This is like Tiger King.
Oh Lord!
But it's a little sadder. You know, at least with Tiger King, it was highly entertaining and crazy. This is crazy and sad at the same time. Like I said, it's a train wreck you can't look away from, and you really should check this out if you want to be entertained. It's nutty.
So you suggest I watch it and tell you what I feel.
Look, it doesn't reach the heights of Tiger King, but this Tanya character is a piece of work.
Okay.
A real piece of work.
Right.
And she's cracked out. And at the end of episode 2, you know, after, I don't want to give anything away. I'll just say at the end of episode 2, your mouth drops open and you're like, what the F?
Oh my goodness.
You know, okay. So just take it from me. Okay. If you like these kinds of shows, if you like Tiger King, you're going to like this, but not as much. Okay.
All right.
How's that?
All right. You had me at Dolly Parton of the chimp world.
Yeah, there you go. Over on Netflix, a series dropped, a limited series called The Perfect Couple, with Nicole Kidman and Liev Schreiber. Great cast. When a lavish wedding ends in disaster before it can even begin, with a body discovered just hours before the ceremony, someone in the wedding party is a suspect. Really terrific cast. This is a whodunit in 6 episodes, and it twists and turns. The filmmakers do a great job of making you believe certain people could be the culprit, the murderer. And by the end, the last episode, the actual murderer who gets revealed is a bit of a shock. And they give you the backstory of what happened. It's really wonderfully done. It's beautifully shot on Nantucket Island. If you've not been to Nantucket, I've been there a number of times. It's an absolutely beautiful place during the summer. And this is shot on a beautiful compound on the water. Beautiful, cedar shake home, mansion really on the water. Just wonderfully done. There's some beautiful photography in this as well, I have to say. Also, John, do you know who Paul Hewson is?
Is he a designer?
Paul Hewson is Bono.
Whoa.
Right? Bono's real name is Paul Hewson.
Right.
Well, guess what? Eve Hewson is one of the stars. She plays Amelia Sachs, who's sort of a central character in this series. She's a terrific actress.
I was thinking
she has a little bit of a look of Emily Blunt in some angles, and Kate Winslet in other angles.
Okay.
And she does a terrific job in this series. Liev Schreiber, you remember him from, what was the series with Ray?
Well, he was in the Wolverine movies as a Sabretooth.
But he was in a series where he played a fixer.
Yes.
And I can't remember what it was. It's Ray Donovan.
Oh, Ray Donovan. Okay.
Yeah, Ray Donovan. But he's been in a ton of stuff. Anyway, it's a terrific six episode miniseries. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. And so did Nancy.
It's on my list. I really dug the trailer and loved the cast, Liev Schreiber. And, she's great. Good stuff.
Yeah, really well done. And then over on Hulu, I watched the first 2 episodes of Only Murders in the Building season 4. And, if you're a fan of Only Murders in the Building, this is a terrific series with Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez as the central characters. Meryl Streep is also in this. There's also guest stars. Amy Ryan makes an appearance again. I'm trying to remember who else. Jane Lynch comes back this season. Zach Galifianakis and Eugene Levy make appearances. So it's a fun comedy drama series. I really enjoyed this show. So that's what I've been watching, Aljon. What have you been watching?
Well, it's been a crazy week. Bands are getting back together. It seems to me like 97 is coming back in a big way. We talked last week about the Oasis reunion. No Doubt is reuniting. A bunch of great bands are on the road touring. And Linkin Park, after 7 years, is making a comeback. And if you're unfamiliar with the band Linkin Park, they've done 7 years ago. They had a passing of one of their vocalists. And I have to say that they're back. They're back at it. Chester Bennington had passed.
What did he die of? Like cancer or something? I remember when he died.
Yeah, he struggled with depression and he died from an apparent suicide. So he offed himself. It's a very sad situation. That happened around the same time I think Chris Cornell had passed from Soundgarden. It was just a tragic time in rock. But the band has got back together, and I saw the reunion show. They were streaming it, and they have a brand new live album, and
they have a new female vocalist.
They have a female vocalist. So there's a lot of stuff there. Emily Armstrong is the female vocalist, along with Mike Shinoda, who's playing guitar and singing as well. And her voice is different, but there are some callbacks to what Chester did, which is a little bit on the distorted screaming side of things. But toward the later part of Linkin Park's career, they started doing a lot more singing. And my criticism is this. I like Linkin Park a lot. I never got to see them live. Their collaborations with Jay-Z were amazing. They were just part of that kind of modern rock vibe that really hit the airwaves in a big way in the late 2000s. 2008, 2010, and they were a great band. All I have to say is that their new singer Emily should just be her. And there are a lot of times when you see, first of all, it's very difficult to sing these kind of songs when you have to kind of put that distortion. I have a vocal background as well as a music background for music education, and to put that distortion on your voice, the vocal distortion that you do to sing some of this hard rock music, can be very difficult for prolonged periods of time. And this is her first outing with the band. I believe they played in Chicago is where this live stream was happening, and releasing a new record. And it's a lot to take in. Fans are, of course, going to be very divided regarding this, that it's a female, but she pulls it off well. But I would have loved to see her do more. And I say that because every song she went to the audience to have the audience sing some of the chorus of songs and things like that. It's like, this is your first time out. You should do everything you can to sing the parts. If you don't sound like Chester, that's fine. Be yourself, and people will understand. Look, the band has to play music. And this is a revelation that I came with this week, Dave, just thinking about music in general. Music is a part of my fiber. Performing is part of my being, and tried to not perform. And then I got involved with this Music City Hero Coalition, and I enjoy playing. I like playing with other people. It just makes my life meaningful. I enjoy it a lot, along with my family, but it's who I am. And this band, you can't fault them for moving forward with a new singer. Right. They have music within them. They have new music they want to release. And just because, you know, they had a passing of an integral member of the band doesn't mean that they shouldn't move forward. Many other bands have done this throughout time. You know, you look at Van Halen, you look at, the Eagles, you look at other people, they've had lineup changes after lineup changes. They still want to get out there and perform. They should be allowed to do the same thing. But I will say, just be you. You can sing, you can do whatever. If you want to have a distorted vocal, do it. But I think you should, if you're a big fan of that band, check it out for yourself. And maybe you agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. That's just my take. And I applaud them for coming back out and putting out some new music.
You know, Aljon, when a band loses a member and they bring in a new member, that member should put their own stamp on it. They shouldn't be trying to recreate what was. What was. Now, exactly. You've got to take it to turn the page, and that new person brings their own stamp to it.
Exactly right. When Sammy Hagar is on the road with Michael Anthony and performing songs from Van Halen and his own career, Joe Satriani still sounds like Joe Satriani. He doesn't sound like Eddie Van Halen. No one will sound like Eddie Van Halen, no matter how hard you try. And if you do try, that's fine. Go see that band. But you go to see Sammy and the rest of those people perform those songs and pay homage to the spirit of Van Halen. You don't want to see a clone of Van Halen. At least I don't. I know what I'm going into seeing. And I feel like if you go in as a fan of the band and you go in knowing that this is a lineup change and it's different, I do feel like musically they should go back to the woodshed and find keys that work even better for the music as well as the singer, because I think they tried it, but I think you lose some of that hard edge when you try to transpose the songs up for a female voice. But that's just me. Other things I saw this week, Dave, other than the music, which I can go on about for a while, is I saw the movie Longlegs. And Longlegs is a very quirky movie. I will say it's Nick Cage. That's all I have to say. It's Nick Cage. He produces it. He stars in it. The description is, in a pursuit of a serial killer, an FBI agent uncovers a series of occult clues that she must solve to find this terrifying killing spree to end it. It's one part Silence of the Lambs, one part The Shining, another part just all Nick Cage. And Nick runs away with the film. He plays the Longlegs character that's somewhat quasi based on like the son of the Zodiac Killer or like Son of Sam, leaving these cryptic messages throughout years and years and years. And this FBI agent kind of finds him and has this intuition that this person is being here or there, so much so that she's being tested by the FBI that she might be a little bit psychic or whatever the case is, because how is she able to find these clues? As it unfolds, the story unfolds, it gets deeper into the family of it all and into this connection that this FBI special agent has with Longlegs, the serial killer. It's not bad. There's some pacing issues up front. Things get really high gear. They kick in a high gear right in the third act. So there's a little bit of some pacing that I would have liked to see build a little bit more. But overall, it's creepy It's shot in a way that harkens back to some of those late 80s kind of films because it takes place, I believe, in the 90s. You can tell in the FBI office, there's a picture of Bill Clinton. So they're dropping various hints about the time period, which is nice.
Sure.
It's very subtle, but the way it's shot, the way that there's red being put into the background, it's very retro looking. I think people look at it and go, this is like an independent film that Nick Cage produced that has the vibe of some of the newer kind of horror movies coming out from studios like A24. So if that's the kind of gritty style you're looking for, this is a great movie for you. I rated it maybe about a 6.5. So it's a good watch, but Nick Cage, very good in this film. Something else I watched this week, which is definitely different, is going to be Puss in Boots. Just for the fans out there, The Adventures of Puss in Boots is an animated series from 2015 to 2018 that I just discovered for the kids. And of course, this takes the Puss in Boots character that was made popular by Shrek. This is a smart little animated show. It's got high quality.
It's from DreamWorks?
It's from DreamWorks. And, okay. Of course, this is the famous cat that protects the city of San Lorenzo, a mythical land invisible to the outside world. He is the cause of them losing their mystical shield, and then he's brought in, and then he's defending this place. And it's smart and it's fun, and I love animation where I can sit and watch with the kids, where there's a layer of it just for the adults, much like Bluey or some other things. So go out of your way to check it out. I thought the animation was great for a TV show, so check that out. But not least is The Deliverance, and this is a horror thriller, and this is loosely based on a true story. An Indiana family discovers the strange and demonic occurrences that convince them of their community that their house is a portal to hell. So yes. So basically the struggling mother who has to live at home now with her mom is getting it together. She is just recently got separated from her husband. She's got 3 kids. This house they just moved into with her mom, which is also Meryl Streep. And let me tell you, it's a predominantly black cast. Andra Day plays Ebony. The kids are amazing in it. Also, Monique plays a social worker. Omar Epps is in here as one of the neighbors. And Glenn Close plays Sandra Day's mother, Alberta. You know, mixed family, interesting story of abuse from the mom to the daughter. And the daughter is facing, just hard times, and she's a struggling alcoholic trying to get back, and take care of her kids, struggling. And then this house is haunted. This house has got a demonic spirit, finds the weakness and takes advantage of it to gain access into this realm. And then she's found out by this kind of exorcist, if you will, that has been looking after the family. Supposedly this exorcist is one of the disciples. So after years and years of passing down, instead of being the exorcist, like with the power of Christ that compel you and this and that and the other, this quote unquote disciple uses herself as a vessel for quote unquote Jesus to come in and exorcise these demons that are into the world. So there's a little bit of that exposition that's put in there, but basically it's like an exorcist type of thing. And I have to say, Glenn Close and the actress Andra Day, they have a great relationship, and it's great. Everywhere that Glenn Close comes in, she steals the scene, and she does a really good job. And I can tell the reason why she wanted to do this film, because she wanted to play a demon. Spoiler alert. She wanted to play a demon, and she does a damn fine job at it. And while the movie gets fair to middling scores there across the board, I will say this is a good watch. Even with pacing at the very beginning being an issue, it does paint the picture and sets up the story for what you're going to see and why you should care about the characters and eventually the payoff. And, this is much better than the real life story that it is based off of. So check out The Deliverance. You can stream it now on Netflix. Check it out. Netflix original. That is all we've been watching this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you've been watching. Send us those emails and we'll check it out in a future episode.
Skull Rock Podcast. This week in Disney and pop culture.
Well, Dave, Beetlejuice is, 36 years in the making and is scoring big at the box office for Warner Brothers. Finally, they got a hit on the board, seemingly. 41.5 million, including 13 million in the previews. It looks like the weekend projections should be hitting around 97 to 102 million plus. Dave, you liked it. It seems like people are voting with their wallet for this one.
I think so, and again, I encourage people to go see it for themselves. I enjoyed it, and, these types of movies, I go in, a certain amount of expectations, but, this hopefully is going to play right into the Halloween season.
All right. Yes, definitely so. Yeah. The only other wide offering is indie distributor A24 psychological horror pick The Front Room, which is failing to find a groove with its audience. That's a rough one, man. 1.5 million. Yeah, that's rough. And, I'm not one to see like an A24 movie in a theater. That is something where I'm going to watch that streaming at home. Sorry, guys. It's just how I feel about it. Back at the top of the chart, Deadpool and Wolverine set in to come in second once again on a tremendous run, followed by the new movie biopic Reagan, which is hitting theaters. That looks to be an interesting one. And then also Alien Romulus, which I have yet to see, looks really good. Mixed reviews, I think, from some people. But Dave, you saw Alien Romulus, last week, right?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it a couple weeks ago. I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
It was fine. It's not my typical kind of movie, but I went and saw it anyway with my friend. Sometimes, when I go to the movies, I look at what's playing and go, all right, I wouldn't really run out to see this movie, but I'll go see this because there's nothing else.
Yeah, well, you see, but you can't say you didn't give it a shot. You gave it a shot.
No, and I try to go to the movies when I'm in town. I go to the movies at least once a week, sometimes twice, because I'm a fan of films. I love to see what's coming out. But, I've always said on this show, Aljon, if there's any genre that I kind of shy away from, it's the horror genre.
I got you covered. I got you covered.
Although I will go see, comedy horror.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you saw Halloween, so go
the Halloween movies or, those kinds of things. I will go see them.
Well, you mentioned this, Dave. You're knee deep into it. Only Murders in the Building gets renewed for season 5. I think this is a series that people just love. The chemistry of Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez is palpable. It's an Emmy award-winning series, and I love seeing them on the screen, on the small screen. So looking forward to the next season.
Yeah, I hope they keep making this as long as they have good stories to tell. And, each story is, arcs over the season, and they're really well done, just on all levels,
Yes.
I mean, set designs and, the actors, cinematography, everything is just really top notch about this series.
I'm just waiting for a cameo from Chevy Chase. That's all I'm saying. The first trailer for Taylor Sheridan's Landman shows a high-powered ensemble cast sparring over the oil business in West Texas. John Hamm, Demi Moore, Billy Bob Thornton. What a cast, Dave. This is kind of like Dallas, but in real life, or kind of real life, a different type of setting.
I think Taylor Sheridan hits it out of the park. If you've watched Yellowstone, if you watch some of his other shows, I think that I watched this trailer and I was like, okay, the trailer did what it needed to do. It got me hooked. I want to watch this.
Well, the cast is out of the park. Awesome. I mean, those are heavy hitters, John Hamm, Thornton, Moore. I mean, those are big, big hitters. So this looks to be like a great cast. And, if they've signed on to do this series, you got to know this is quality. So there you go.
Absolutely.
Speaking of quality, Bosch, one of the biggest series on Amazon streaming, Bosch Legacy, ending with season 3. The final installment of the series offers the extension of Prime's Video's Bosch to stream 2025. It's the end. Dave, have you seen this series? I mean, I know it's been around
first off, Aljon, I watched all 7 seasons of Bosch.
Yeah.
And I've watched the 2 seasons of Bosch Legacy. And I'm looking forward to Bosch Legacy Season 3, which is going to drop in March of next year. And I think, look, all I'm going to say is this is a terrific series. And Bosch is played by Titus Welliver, and he is just absolutely great as the character. You couldn't have asked for anybody better to play Bosch, Harry Bosch, or Hieronymus Bosch, as his full name is. Harry Bosch is it's a great series. If you haven't watched it, you should check it out. And what's really terrific is that once they end this, they are bringing a new series in the fall of 2025 with a character also from Michael Connelly called Renee Ballard. So the Renee Ballard series. And I'm just looking forward to seeing that. I think Michael Connelly's a great crime writer. And, this, if you haven't seen the Bosch series, check it out on Amazon.
No, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, here we are here with the, go ahead, Dave, say it.
The obituary roll call.
So we have here the passings for the week, notable passings. Frank Griffin, Steve Martin's makeup man, speaking of Steve Martin, makeup man on Roxanne and much more, dies at the age of 95. This former actor and brother of actress Deborah Paget also worked on films including Westworld, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Dave, it's not very often that we give flowers, if you will, to people behind the scenes like this, world-class makeup artist. Man, what a great life, and worked on some amazing films throughout his career.
This guy had a fantastic career. And you know something, Aljon, we do try to give props to below the line people, so to speak. They're not the stars, but these are the people who are the stars behind the scenes, behind the camera. And Frank Griffin was an incredible makeup artist. I mean, he worked on, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Scarecrow, Westworld, Close Encounters, as you mentioned, Urban Cowboy, Midnight Run, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Vacation, Revenge of the Nerds. He said Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I mean, he worked on Broken Arrow back in 1950. I mean, look, just an incredible resume of films. I mean, he worked with Steve Martin on Parenthood, My Blue Heaven, Father of the Bride, L.A. Story, Grand Canyon, House Sitter, Leap of Faith, A Simple Twist of Fate, Father of the Bride 2, Sergeant Bilko, The Spanish Prisoner, Bowfinger, Cocaine, Cheaper by the Dozen, Bringing Down the House, Shop Girl. I mean, I could just go on and on and on.
Tremendous.
So, really, what an incredible career and an incredible life. I mean, 95, we should all be so lucky.
Absolutely. Speaking of tremendous lives, here we have at 110 years old, Dave, Norman Spencer. He was a collaborator with David Lean projects like Vanishing Point, produced so many great films, including Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia, some of the greatest films out there. 10 years old, Dave.
Honestly, when I saw this come across, I was like, wow. You can make it to 110. What a life, and this guy really had a life. He worked with David Lean. And as you mentioned, I mean, he worked on, so many great movies, And by the way, Joseph Bankiewicz's Suddenly last summer, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery Clift, and Katharine Hepburn. You mentioned Vanishing Point, but, Bridge over the River Kwai, and of course, Lawrence of Arabia. Well, Lawrence of Arabia is one of my favorite films. It's also one of my favorite movie soundtracks.
Yes.
It's just an epic movie soundtrack. And, I watch Lawrence of Arabia periodically. It is such a great movie, a powerful film. And also, by the way, The Bridge Over the River Kwai is an amazing film. And by the way, I saw The Bridge Over the River Kwai at a drive-in. It was a re-release, and I saw it at a drive-in theater, the Johnny All-Weather Drive-In Theater in Amityville, Long Island.
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Not far from the Amityville Horror. Bridge Over the River Kwai, really one of the great war movies.
Nice. Yes.
From the 1950s. Anyway, yes. 110, what a life.
Oh, man, what a life. James Darren, a lot of people will know him as some of these pop singer crooning holograms on Deep Space Nine. I remember seeing him. Been a cop on TJ Hooker. So he's been on TV. He's a crooner, singer. He passes away at the age of 88. As former teen idol and pop singer, played the dreamy surfer Moondoggie on the Gidget movies before starring on a television show on Time Tunnel and TJ Hooker. He passed away this past Monday at the age of 88. I can tell you that I remember seeing him on those shows. And I specifically have a fondness for him. Deep Space Nine, which is amazing. If you're not familiar with his work on Deep Space Nine as a holographic singer, Vic Fontaine, he was one of the most enjoyable characters on that show. as the characters would enter the holodeck, the holographic room, and they would basically enter Vic Fontaine's Vegas show and sit down and have a good time there and kind of relax and talk about their lives with him. He always lent a sympathetic ear as Vic Fontaine. As a Star Trek fan, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and he was one of these multi-talented performers, from that era of the late 50s into the 60s and 70s, where he was not only a pop singer, but he was an actor in movies and television, and has that, classic, sort of Rat Pack look to him.
Yeah, certainly. And that's exactly why he was chosen. And that's exactly how he sounded as well, which is really cool.
88, what a life.
What a life, man. What a life. Well, that wraps up that segment here on Skull Rock Podcast. Now let's sit back and enjoy the main event for today. We are sitting back with story artist and director Steve Anderson talking about his new book. He adds author to his resume with the book Disney In Between, right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Let's do it.
Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by listeners like you. We would like to thank Christine Bannis, Spencer Wright, Lindsay Scaife, and Joshua Volkert. Support the show for as little as 99 cents per month by clicking on our listener support link in our show notes. If you are interested in advertising your event, business, or service, please email Aljon at skullrockpodcast.com. Thank you for your ongoing support.
Aljon, we have a repeat guest this week. It is a story artist, animator, director Steve Anderson, or should I say Steven Anderson? Either way, right? Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Aljon. Great to be here. I guess my author name is Steven, so I guess
Steven. Yes, it is Steven on the book, and that's why we have you back, because I'm very excited. You have a new book coming out in September called Disney In Between: The Lost Years, 1966 to 1986. Yes. And I'm excited about this book because I'm one of the few who had the opportunity to read this manuscript and to have the honor of giving you a jacket quote, which I'll read later on towards the end of this interview. But the first question I have to say, you're a first-time author.
Yes.
That's exciting. I mean, you must feel excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
And the next question I have to ask you is, how did this book come about? Like, where did the bug come from that said, I have to write about this period of Disney history?
Yeah, well, this period, for the most part, so as you said, the years are 66 to 86 that the book covers. Save for 3 or 4 years, this was all my childhood. This is the Disney that I grew up with. Obviously, I loved the films that Walt produced when he was alive, and those were hugely influential to me. But this was all the new stuff. And so I absorbed this stuff like crazy. I loved all these films from this time period. And so just on a personal note, I thought it would be really exciting to just dig into these movies that I loved so much as a kid, talk to people that worked on them, find out all the stories, all the stuff that was going on at the studio during that time period. What was going on during the time of these movies being made? Then in addition to that, what I realized is that when you look at a lot of the Disney history books and things that have been written about the studio's history, this time period is typically leapfrogged over in favor of the time before it, which is Walt's time, obviously, hugely influential, successful, incredibly creative time. And then the time after it, which is the Eisner, Wells, and Katzenberg era, kind of starting in the mid 80s into, kicking off the huge amount of growth that happened in the company with parks, with live action movies, of course, the animation renaissance that happened. This period, this sort of in-between period, nestled in between those two big, important extremes, is really not discussed. And so I thought this is an opportunity to really crack open those stories and examine what went on in this company, in the studio, during a time where they were struggling a little bit. They were a bit lost without Walt and didn't quite know how to exist in Hollywood without that figure out in front leading them, and then also how to deal with technological changes that were going on, social changes that were going on, Hollywood changing so much in the 70s and in the 80s. So this was a time of great indecision for them, a great betweenness again, which is why I kind of thought Disney In Between would be a good title for it.
Now, Steve, we've had you on the show before. We did an extensive interview with you about your career. Mm-hmm. You directed Meet the Robinsons. You were at Walt Disney Animation Studios. Our time overlapped there. We knew each other there. Rather than going, recapping that, I want our listeners to know that that interview is in our archives and they can go and listen to that. But your book is not just about animation that happened from the time Walt passed away until Roy E. Disney sort of saved the company and brought in Eisner, Wells, and Katzenberg. You're talking about all the live action films, sort of the Herbie the Love Bugs and, Herbie Goes Bananas and, the Apple Dumpling Gang and, those kinds of films, which are really, some of them are corny, but they're sort of classic in a corny sense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How did you start? I mean, where did you start? Did you decide I'm going to start in 1966 when Walt passed away and move forward?
Well, I actually started with a gentleman named Bernie Mattinson that, of course, Dave knows.
Yeah, the great Bernie Mattinson who passed away this last year, just shy of his 70th
year.
Working with the Walt Disney Company. He was 88. He started when he was 18, and he died like a week or two before his actual 70th anniversary, which is just phenomenal. He's the longest running employee of the Walt Disney Company ever.
Yeah.
I mean, he exceeded John Hench by 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's kind of where I started because while we were making Winnie the Pooh, the 2011 Winnie the Pooh feature, I think it was around 2009, 2010 that I decided, I've always been dreaming about doing some kind of history project of this time period. And I said, I'm going to start because sitting next to me in the story room is Bernie. And who better to start with than the guy who started in 1953 at the Walt Disney Studios and pretty much saw it all. I mean, one of the few people left that actually worked at the studio when Walt was there. And so I thought Bernie has such a great context for everything and was a huge part of this in-between era as well, through animation, through story, through directing Great Mouse Detective and Mickey's Christmas Carol. So I started with Bernie. And then luckily I was also working with so many other people that were there in that time period. Chris Buck, Mike Giammo, Mike Gabriel, Dave Block. And so I just started pulling the people that were around me and said, hey, can I grab you, to talk with you guys? And I decided I was going to let the people kind of determine what the story was. I didn't really want to impose a narrative before I just started digging in and learning what everybody's experiences were, what everybody's feelings were about the time period. So I must have interviewed for a good 10 years or so before I really started writing. And then and as you said, I also covered live action. So once I got a good foundation with animation, I started reaching out to a few people that could give me some context in live action. A little bit more challenging than animation because so many of the people that worked in live action, certainly throughout the 70s, are not with us anymore because they were also Walt's colleagues and some family members and people that he brought up through the ranks. So sadly, it was a little harder to get, to find people that could shed light on that side of things. But I think I got a pretty good balanced account between live action and animation during that time period because I thought it was important to do both.
Were you able to, you recorded all those interviews I remember that because when I did the interview with you, it was recorded. And that's got to be 15 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
Like 12 or 15 years ago. Yeah. But did you then have those interviews turned into transcripts? Did you have them converted or to a Word document?
Yeah, I just transcribed them myself. And then I started making what I called my garbage draft. And I just anything that was interesting, I just copy and pasted it onto this massive draft, just quotes from everybody.
And it was broken down by movies and years and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of helped me get a flow for it. And then it was easy in quotes. It was then easy to go through that document and kind of start seeing a flow, a narrative, a story taking place. And then, writing it went relatively quick. Since my brain had been in all that for so long.
Were you able to contact Ron Miller at all?
I was talking with Howard Green, Disney, about getting a Ron Miller interview. In fact, I even wrote a letter, like an email. Howard said, write up what you want to say to Ron Miller. And so I wrote up a kind of an introductory email to send. And then very soon after that, we heard he passed away. So sadly, I did not get a chance to.
And were you able to get any of the stars of some of those films that might be still around that you were able to sit down with? Because I'm sure some of them would have jumped at the chance to talk about some of those movies. Because in a sense, they're a bit obscure. Some of them, they although they're fun as hell. They really are.
Yeah, I mean, probably the actor that I was the most excited to talk with was a gentleman named Charles Martin Smith, who he was in American Graffiti. He was in The Untouchables, and he was the star of Never Cry Wolf, 1984. And I never thought I would get a chance to talk with him, but reached out, and he said, sure, I'd be happy to sit down. So I did a phone interview with Charles Martin Smith, and he had been, I had kind of forgotten, he is in Herbie Goes Bananas. He's also in a movie called No Deposit, No Return, and he was in Never Cry Wolf. So he had a good, couple years there with the company, not as a stable, in their stable, but kind of came and went throughout some different films. And he was fantastic to talk with. And Never Cry Wolf is a really interesting film. I love the film. I've always loved it. I
love that film. I remember seeing that film in the theaters. I thought it was a really terrific movie.
It's fantastic. And the thing that I was most fascinated with what he told me is that it was basically all improvised. They had a script, but when they went up to Alaska to shoot it, they just threw it out and made up stuff. They had like a 3 or 4 hour cut of the movie at one point, and the studio was ready to shut them down because they just thought they were Tom Roy and Ron Miller thought they were just out of control totally. So but that was really fascinating, really cool to get to talk with him.
And is he retired from acting, or?
I think he's moved more into directing. He directed a movie and its sequel called A Dolphin's Tale.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember some of his other more recent films, but I think he's moved more into directing than acting.
And he still lives in Los Angeles?
I think so. We were on the phone, so I'm pretty sure he is in Los Angeles. Yeah.
That's awesome. But so he was helpful and nice guy. Anyone else?
Got to speak with Pete from Pete's Dragon, Sean Marshall, which was really cool. The director of The Black Hole is named Gary Nelson. He also directed Freaky Friday. So again, I tried to find people that had a couple films that could kind of give a bit of a longer narrative. So Gary Nelson. And Gary Nelson also directed a bunch of live action, wonderful little Disney movies as well. So he had a really good relationship with the studio, and he was wonderful to talk with. Unfortunately, he just passed away a couple of years ago as well. But I'm so glad I got a chance to talk.
I was going to say, at least you got a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, but everybody was so generous with their time and really loved talking about working for Disney, because even if they hadn't worked there during Walt's time, they were all fans of Walt, and they were all fans of Disney films. And even again, maybe they worked there post Walt, and they probably would have loved to have worked with Walt, but just to be able to step foot on the Disney lot for these people was like a dream come true. So everyone was so generous and positive with their stories.
Now, once you sort of did all of those interviews, how long did it take for you to really start to sort of cobble together, really, that whole narrative and weave in quotes and all of that kind of stuff? I mean, was that like a multi-year process?
Yeah, I would say, COVID was a nice motivator because I was home, and I said, I'm just going to start writing this stinking thing.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of time to focus on it. So I would say, probably a good year before I had a draft that I felt comfortable sharing with people, just to say, can you take a look at it? And again, to kind of figure out what the story was. I wanted to, took me a while to kind of hone and trim and shape, but that was fun. I enjoyed that process.
Yeah, it's like being a sculptor almost.
Yeah.
You're like pushing clay around and pulling off stuff here and added stuff there. And when you started to share that draft, were you sharing it to people who were knowledgeable about the company, and were you looking to get, valid notes back, like, hey, this date is wrong, or hey, you should look into this because I think you should add, blah, blah, blah. Were you getting those kinds of things back? Is that what you were looking for?
Well, I was looking more for actually people that didn't know the history as much, just to kind of get a gut reaction of, oh, this is interesting, or I have no idea what you're talking about, or this is way too inside baseball. Like nobody outside of a small little sphere of animation or Disney fans are going to understand this book. I wanted to get kind of that kind of feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was important to me to make it, to certainly gear it towards fans, but also that anybody could pick it up and read it. And if you had even a casual interest in Disney, you could still follow it and still. You wanted it to be accessible. Yeah.
Accessible to a wide audience of people who maybe they're fans of the Herbie the Love Bug movies, some of those live action films from that period, and they would find it to be an interesting read. So, exactly. And did you get that positive feedback from people?
Yeah, they were really, the people that read it were really, obviously didn't really know much about these movies, much about this time period, and actually found it pretty interesting that it even happened because this gets so skipped over in the Disney history. People just kind of assume that Disney's always been Disney, that's successful in making, Mary Poppins and Little Mermaid, and that there's no hiccups in their history. So to hear that was interesting to them.
Yeah, I have to say, Steve, when I read a draft of this book, there was like, the animation I knew, because I've been a fan and steeped in it for so long. But the live action, like I knew the names of the films. I remembered seeing a lot of those films when they were first releases, in movie theaters. But I found it so fascinating to know more about that part of the company, those live action films that they were doing, especially during that period.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found it really interesting. If you look at a lot of the filmmakers that were working, that were directing, producing, and writing the Disney live action films through pretty much most of the 70s, so many of them do date back into Walt's time. And if you look at their list of credits, the majority of them are mainly television directors. And I found that really interesting, that it was very consistent for them to hire people from television. And I always wondered why is that? Why would you not hire movie directors? Not that there's anything wrong with television directors, but I just found it interesting that you wouldn't have TV directors for Wonderful World of Disney show episodes and then hire film directors for your movies. And one of the person that I talked to, he was a producer there. His name was Mark Sturdivant. He was the one that was responsible for buying Roger Rabbit, and he was going to produce the very first version of Roger Rabbit.
Wow.
He said that in his mind, it was because TV directors essentially are not auteurs. And Walt's process was, he's heavily involved in the script development and getting all the talent assembled. He's hands off for the production of the film, shooting the film. And then when shooting is done and we go to editing and post, that's when Walt came back in and really got his hands on it again. So you really needed very workmanlike, professional direct craftsmen, if they were all men back then, to kind of come in and sort of know how to set this up and shoot a film fast, economically, minimum amount of setups, like move through it. You didn't need, a Francis Ford Coppola or a Martin Scorsese or a Steven Spielberg, because there really wasn't a place in Walt's process and the process that continued into the 70s for these kind of auteur directors, for somebody to have a vision from A to Z.
Walt was that person.
Walt was that, exactly.
Exactly.
And that was part of the transition that happened then too, because as the 70s gave way to the 80s, they started bringing in outside directors. Like we talked about Never Cry Wolf.
Yeah.
That was directed by Carroll Ballard, who directed The Black Stallion a few years prior to that. Right. That guy's like a visionary. They brought in Ron Howard to do Splash.
Yeah.
They brought in a director named Tim Hunter to do a film called Tex that was based on an S.E. Hinton novel. So they started bringing in outside directors that had more of a personal vision. And because that's kind of what was going on in Hollywood. The 70s was all about the movie brats, the De Palmas and the Scorseses and the Coppolas. And then once the blockbuster era happened with Lucas and Spielberg, it was all about the director. And Disney wasn't known for their directors. They were known for the name Disney. That's what set them apart, not who directed the films. So it's really, I found that a really fascinating evolution that was going on there.
Yeah, when you say movie brats, I think of Francis Ford Coppola's quote from after he had completed Apocalypse Now, and he said, I think I'm quoting this correctly. He said, "We had too much equipment, too much money, and we went insane."
Oh yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it was sort of like those storytellers went off and made the movie they wanted to make. Yeah. And oftentimes in like a swirl of insanity going on, which was kind of the case with Apocalypse Now, which Coppola's wife had documented.
Yeah. Yeah, but that wasn't the Disney way.
Yeah, and it certainly was not the Disney way. And Disney also was very conservative as far as how much money they were going to spend on films.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of had a formula during that period, didn't they?
Very much so. I mean, if thinking about movies like Absent-Minded Professor or The Shaggy Dog that Walt made, they really became those kind of almost like hour-and-a-half sitcoms about some kind of unexplained supernatural thing that would happen. Like, and Herbie the Love Bug is the same way. Why does this car talk? Or not talk, but why does this car think? And why is it sentient? I don't know. It just is. And so they made a sequel to The Shaggy Dog, The Shaggy DA, also during this time period. Unexplained magic. There's this ring, you read an inscription on the ring, and you turn into a dog. Why? Don't know. That was kind of a formula that they did. Freaky Friday, another one. A mother and a daughter say, "I'd like to switch places with you." And they wake up the next morning and they've switched places. Why? Nobody knows. But comedy ensues.
And nobody really cared. No. Like you didn't have to have the full explanation of why. You just believed that, okay, this happened. Now, like you said, all the craziness goes on.
I think today you would have to explain it. Today, I think audiences want to know those kind of things.
Yeah.
But back then, you just kind of went with it.
Yeah. And, once you kind of got your narrative together, how much revision did you do? Did you listen to people and say, I'm going to go back in and do another pass? I know when I write books, I probably rewrite the book 4 or 5 times, by the time it's finished, you know. So,
yeah, I definitely went back tons of times over it after showing it to people. I shared it with a couple editors just on my own, just to kind of, again, get some gut reactions like, how's my writing style? I've never written a book. So how is it? And that was really illuminating because they had some structure notes that I thought were really good. And I implemented those, and I was constantly shuffling and moving things around and trimming. And the trick was for me to not make it a trivia book, but to make it the story of the studio. If you almost see the studio is the main character, is the protagonist, and the inciting incident of its story is that Walt dies. And so now how does it evolve? What is its character arc, from 66 to 86? There are little bits of trivia throughout, and I do talk about some production related history of some of the films, but I tried to keep it more to the creative process, the development of the films, and then the release of the films, and how that made a statement for how the studio was creatively, how it was operating creatively. Because I wanted to, again, I didn't want it to just be, and then this was shot on this day, and then this was shot on this day, and then this happened, and this happened. I didn't want
you didn't want it to be an information dump that was dry. There was a reason why things were happening. Do you feel like sort of the first decade after Walt had passed away was really the studio was mired in the what would Walt have done type of mode? And was it towards the mid 70s to late 70s, early 80s where that thinking was starting to turn and wash out because people were retiring and that kind of stuff?
That's exactly right. And the other thing that happened is in 75, 6, a man named Tom Wilhite came to the studio, and he became head of publicity at first. And then a few years into that, he got the attention of Ron Miller, and Ron Miller promoted him to VP of production in 1979. So Tom became basically the head of the studio and started trying to right the ship. Tom was the one that started opening the doors to outside directors and inviting people in and pitching them projects, or asking those outside directors, do you have a movie you'd like to make with Disney? Come in and work with us. Come make movies at Disney. He really helped spearhead a desire to let go of Walt in a lot of ways, not in a disrespectful way, but holding on to him so tightly was the thing that was keeping the studio from progressing. So Tom started emphasizing, that's really when Frank and Ollie wrote their book, and the 9 Old Men became much more in the spotlight. And Tom spearheaded some exhibits at museums that were more about the animation art and less about Walt. Things like that. Tom was the one that created Touchstone.
And also, I think he's an unsung hero that has not gotten enough credit, because I mentioned him in my Nightmare Before Christmas book, because he was the one that kind of discovered Tim and encouraged him to do Vincent, a stop motion film, and Frankenweenie. I mean, Tom really had an eye for talent. And I've always wondered what he would have done and what further impact he would have had on the company had he stayed longer.
Yeah.
You
can start to see it with things like Splash or Never Cry Wolf. That was one of Tom's projects as well. Yeah. Like, you can start to see the
shift.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not disrespectful about forgetting about Walt. It was really about getting out of that mode of what would Walt have done and into the mode of moving Walt's vision forward.
Yep.
Of how he, would have worked had he lived.
Yeah. Yeah. And show people that we're bringing in young talent. We're bringing in people from outside. We're changing up the way Disney works. It's an exciting time, and also come work for us. If you're a young person, and you're a filmmaker, you're an artist, come work for Disney, come be a part of it. It's not just this creaky old.
Did you have an opportunity to talk to Tom?
Sort of. I did. I actually used to work for Tom. I worked for his studio, Hyperion Animation.
Oh, okay. So you knew him.
When I first started in the business. And so we did email a little bit, and I asked for his blessing that I was going to do this, and he said, great. And then I was able to access an interview that Ron and John had actually done with Tom. Everybody gave me permission to use that interview, and so that was kind of that was like the core of what I used from Tom. But
that's awesome. I mean, I think somebody should write a book about Tom Wilhite, because he really, I think, did a lot for the company and has not gotten the credit that's due him.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
So you finished writing the book, and so tell me, the next step was you went out to publishers to try and see if they were interested. What happened?
Yep, got a lot of emails, never responded to. Until which par for the course, I suppose.
It is. You have to be thick-skinned about it. Every single writer goes through that. I mean, honestly, we laugh about it, but J.K. Rowling's with her first Harry Potter book. I always tell this story because when I couldn't believe it when I read this. She went to every single major publisher, every sort of second tier, third tier. She went to all these different publishers, and they all said no. And it was Scholastic, of all people. Remember when we were in elementary school and we'd get the Scholastic catalog and we'd circle the books we wanted, and they would be delivered to the classroom a month later or something. I mean, it was Scholastic, and the only reason why they published it was the publisher got the manuscript, gave a handful of chapters to his 11-year-old daughter. She read it and asked if she could have more of the book because she really liked it. And he said, we'll publish this book. Wow. And I think that's like what saved Scholastic and has made them what they are today, was because of all the Harry Potter books.
That little 11-year-old girl
Yeah.
Changed the world.
He changed the world, you know? Forget about J.K. Rawlings. No. But so what happened? So you got a lot of rejections, but you obviously got some interest.
Yeah, but got a great response from the Old Mill Press, which is ultimately the publisher that put the book together. And they said, we'd love to do this. Really supportive of the manuscript. And yeah, it was like once I got that acceptance, it felt like almost easy in a way, because it was everything just sort of fell into place. Again, the manuscript, they really didn't. They're very supportive and said, make sure that you're writing the book that you want to write. Don't go through and change it to what you think we want you to change it to, or what you think politically is going to sell books, or whatever it might be. Write the story, write the book, make sure it's your manuscript, your story that you want to tell. And then, designing the book, putting it all together, it was like a piece of cake. It was great.
Now we talked before the show, and you have an advanced copy. What do you think of the book? I
think the book is, it's really surreal.
You're speechless. You're obviously speechless.
It's surreal to be like holding this book, one of my greatest memories, sorry, quick tangent, but one of my greatest memories is as a kid was saving up all my money and going with my mom to the mall and going into the bookstore, whatever, Walden Books or B. Dalton or whatever bookstore.
None of them are around anymore.
No, none of those exist.
But
going straight to the entertainment section and getting whatever, Disney coffee table book was out, Christopher Finch or Leonard Maltin or one of those books. Those books and taking them back home and opening them up and just getting lost in those pages and learning all about the people that made Disney animation, learning about Walt, learning about the art, all that stuff. And so to hold my own now, like cut to 50 or 40 years later, and to be holding my own book with my name on it, that just is beautifully put together. It's a real treat. It feels like a full circle moment for me.
Yeah. And has it made you feel like, hey, I want to do another book? Or having spent 10 or 15 years on this one, you're sort of like, I got that out of my system.
I never thought I could write a book. Oh, the fact that I wrote a book makes me think, oh, maybe I could write another one. So I don't know. I have to find a subject.
What about behind the scenes of making Meet the Robinsons? Or, behind the scenes of Meet the Robinsons and the Winnie the Pooh movie, because you and I both know that these movies that are made, when they're released, they're beautiful works of art, but their birthing process is complete turmoil usually, right? And by the way, it's funny because I had run into somebody the other day, and they work at Disney Studios, at the Walt Disney Animation Studios. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, how's everything going? And they said, well, the entire third act of Moana 2 is still in storyboards, and the movie has to be done in 16 weeks. And I just smiled because I know they'll get it done.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Because that's how we always made all these movies. And the best part for us that we're working on it and in the trenches was the fact that if you had some newbie production manager who it was their first go round on an animated film, the blood drained out of their heads. At some point, they would be, ghost, and they'd be going, we're never going to get this done. We're going to miss the release date. But we never missed the release date. Everybody pulls together and they get the movies finished, But I think it would be fascinating for you to write about that, because I think the fans would love to understand what really goes on behind the scenes, and how these movies are put together. It's somewhat crazy, chaotic process sometimes, because you got hundreds of creative people, swirling around to make a story, to make a film.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just giving you that as
I've kept a journal for most of my life, so I have a lot of the stories written down. So
that's awesome. That is awesome. That's a great thing, But how can people find this book? How can people get this? It's releasing on September 10th, I understand.
That's correct.
To the world, and they can get it at their favorite, book retailer. And I believe there's going to be an ebook edition of it as well. And but how can people get it?
Yeah, well, it's currently available for pre-order. You can go to theoldmillpress.com and you can pre-order a signed copy there.
We love author signed copies.
Yeah. And there's a few different permutations of that. You can get a few signed, you can get one signed. But if you go to theoldmillpress.com, that's where you can pre-order a signed copy.
Fantastic.
And then, like you said, Dave, it'll be out September 10th.
Yeah,
up to the world. And if you pre-order the book now through Old Mill Press, you'll get it before the release. You'll get it sometime around like July-ish.
End of July, beginning of August, somewhere in there. Yeah,
somewhere in there before the September release. So another good reason to go there and check it out.
I actually love that because I think the hardcore fans that are interested in the company history are the ones that are going to jump on it and want to read it before anyone else gets it. And they want to be the first on their block to do it. And that's the way to do it is through theoldmillpress.com, which is one of our sponsors here on the Skull Rock podcast. And they've published a number of my books and I love them to death.
Hey, I just want to put this out there because I'm reading some of the quotes on the sleeve. And I love this quote from Thomas Schumacher. He's a former president of Disney Feature Animation. He says, Steven Anderson's Disney In-Between reminds us that nothing is guaranteed and that artistry is no accident. And I love that quote so much because it is. I mean, we're talking about the labor of love and the pride you have holding your book. It's like a proud papa. And you put the labor in labor of love because of the time you spend in the book. Nothing is guaranteed in this world. Tomorrows are never guaranteed. But this artistry and the wealth of people, the village it takes to raise these projects from its conception to its final delivery to us, the audience who loves these stories. Like you, Steve, I grew up watching Herbie the Love Bug. And it is just amazing that finally, after all these decades, many, many years later, the story is being told of these almost forgotten projects from the Disney companies. Congratulations on this book. What a great quote from Thomas and many more people lending their words to your work in this book. And it's a thick read. It looks like it's an amazing book. How many chapters are in this book and how many pages is it?
It's a 500-page book.
God.
Yeah, it's awesome. A little wordy.
Yeah. When I got the advance, copy from Steve, I read it all the way through and I loved it. I ate it up. It was a page turner for me. In fact, Aljon, I'll read you my quote from the jacket.
Please. I was hoping you would.
I wrote on the back of this book, Disney In-Between is an enthralling journey through a pivotal chapter in Disney's history, tracing the studio's struggle and ultimate triumph from the aftermath of Walt Disney's passing to its revival under Roy E. Disney, Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg. With illuminating interviews from the creative forces behind beloved films, Steven Anderson's book unveils the studio's remarkable transformation, shedding light on the legacy of innovation that has defined Disney's enduring magic, an inspiring tale of resilience and evolution that captivates the imagination. You must read for any Disney enthusiast.
Woohoo!
That's a lot.
Did I put enough emotion into that?
Yeah,
it was good read.
That's a lot to live up to, David.
It was good read. Hey, before you sign off, Steve, I have to ask, in the discovery, doing the decades of research and interviews that you had, what was the most, without spoiling it, right? What was the most interesting thing that you discovered about the Disney company in that era? Was there something that was like super telling or super surprising that you were able to uncover in this book?
The first thing that pops into my head, I guess it's less of a company-wide thing, but more just specifically in the animation department or the animation division. But I found it really fascinating how there was really a battle for the soul of Disney animation going on in the 70s. I knew there was friction between several groups within the animation department, but I didn't know to what extent. And boy, it sounds like it was really heated. And the fact that people were even arguing about, but like the actual type of animation, how do you animate a Disney character? One group is saying it has to be slow and methodical and very, very subtle and everything. That's the only way you can animate it. And a lot of the younger folks were saying, why can't we have snappier timing? Why can't we borrow techniques from Looney Tunes or Tex Avery? Why can't we have smear frames in our animation? No, you can't do that. That's not Disney animation. Disney animation doesn't do blur frames. The fact that it seems such an odd conversation to be having, because ultimately whatever technique fits for the scene to tell the story appropriately, right? That's what you should do. Yeah. Whether it's Looney Tunes, whether it's, French animation, it doesn't matter. But it's so crazy to me that it was such a hotbed of dialogue during that.
And you're really sort of referring to sort of the Don Bluth faction and the Cal Arts faction that was coming in at the late 70s into the early 80s, or I should say mid 70s into the early 80s. And so there was that going on, but then there was the friction between Ron Miller and Roy E. Disney at the top. And at one point, Roy resigned from the board of directors and, all of those things. So there's a lot of that swirling around, especially when you get into the mid 80s for 86, which sort of ends this particular book. I mean, it's 66 to 86, so it's a 20-year period that Aljon, it's absolutely a fascinating read, because as Steve has pointed out, it is an area of Disney history that is not really written about.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I can't wait to devour this book, Steve, and congratulations to you, and thank you, Old Mill Press, for putting this book out, because once again, the Disney fans want to know, to know.
That's it. There you go. There you go. Steve, thank you so much for being on the Skull Rock podcast. It's been a pleasure having you back, and good luck with the book.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Old Mill Press.
The time is now for you to book your next Walt Disney World trip. We're excited to give you the Disney Travel Deal of the Week, brought to you by Kristen. And every week she brings you not only great travel deals, but she saves you time and money. Whether you're going to the Walt Disney World Resort, Disneyland Resort, Adventures by Disney, any cruise line, including the latest and greatest super ships that the Disney Cruise Line has to offer, she's got your hookup. So save time, money, and aggravation by having Kristen navigate her way, save you time and money, and send you on your way to an awesome vacation. Kristen, what is the deal for this week?
Well, it's the same as it has been.
Right.
You can save up to 30% on rooms most nights from November 24th through December 25th. If you can't travel those dates, you can still save up to 20%. For most stays, it's going to be Sunday to Thursday nights from October 6th to November 21st. If you decide to add a 4-day ticket or longer on to your hotel, you will also get extra perk. You will get the park hopper option for free, which is very nice. That means you can go from one part to the other, and there's not all those things that used to be going on, making it difficult.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Yes, Kristen. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
No? Okay. All right. So Kristen will lend you her sound advice. She's gone to the parks hundreds of times, and she's happy to share that with you. Kristen, where can people connect with you to book their next trip and get that free quote?
They can contact me at themeparksandcruises@gmail.com.
Get now.
Hi, I'm Mark Simon, the godfather of storyboarding. And if you rock, you listen to Skull Rock Podcast.
Your attention, please. Now loading on track number 1 for a trip around Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom.
Skull Rock Podcast.
All aboard.
Your Main Street to the world of Disney.
Well, Dave, yet another show in the can, and what an amazing talk with Steve Anderson. That new book, Disney In Between, out, and I cannot wait to delve in further in this lost era of the Walt Disney Company. It's good stuff.
No, it really is. It's terrific. And I applaud Steve for spending so many years doing interviews with the people who were there during that period of time, especially Bernie Mattinson, who passed away this past year?
I think so, yeah.
I think it was this past June. Bernie passed away. He had been with the company for nearly 70 years and, imparted a lot of time with Steve during some interviews to really go into detail, and that's sprinkled throughout the entire book. So, I think it's one of those must-have books for Disney fans.
Oh, most definitely. And thanks a lot for being on the show again, Steve. It's always good having you on the show. And having said that, gang, we're to yet another end of another wonderful episode. If you love Disney and pop culture, don't forget, please like and subscribe to the show. We would certainly appreciate it. You can follow us on all the social medias as well. We're on Facebook, of course, X, LinkedIn, so many other places. Be sure to check out the show archive at skullrockpodcast.com as well. We would appreciate it. You can also send us those emails. We love getting emails. Dave at skullrockpodcast.com or Aljon, ALJON, at skullrockpodcast.com. And also, please note, thank you so much to our great Disney community for supporting us and having us post and promote our shows. Thank you to the Sorcerer Radio Network at srsounds.com, all Disney music all day long. And our friends at the Disney Dorks, thank you for having me post about our shows. And also check out my other podcast, Dining at Disney. Launches 2 shows a week. We talk about Disney parks and Disney food primarily at diningatdisney.com. Dave?
Well, Aljon, I just want to remind everybody, February 1st to the 3rd, Animation Y'all Expo. If you're in the animation business, you're not going to want to miss this, especially if you're up in the Toronto area, Chicago, Atlanta, Florida. If you're in the animation community, of course, the Tennessee Animation Mafia are all going to be converging on Nashville, February 21st to the 20th Expo. I also want to remind you all that my Tunes Behind the Tunes program is on Sirius XM Disney Hits Channel 133. This month, September, we're spotlighting the Tarzan song "You'll Be in My Heart" by Phil Collins.
My favorite.
It's a great album. Yes. The whole album is great, but we're doing "You'll Be in My Heart." Also, tomorrow, Tuesday, September 10th. My book, Find Your Happy Place, the 8-Step Guide to Boosting Your Creativity Through a Personal Retreat, is releasing officially, along with Steve Anderson's new book, Disney In Between the Lost Years, 1966 to 1986. You can get author-signed copies at theoldmillpress.com. And, of course, you can always go to davidbossert.com, where there's plenty of free content on animation and Disney-related history for you guys to read. There's also free stuff you can send away for. And with that, Aljon, I'm going to say go out and have a fantastic week, everybody. By the way, we are going to be doing a truncated show for the next 4 weeks because both Aljon and I are going to be international men of mystery traveling the globe. So we're going to have new shows dropping. As I mentioned, next Monday, we've got Bob Weiss dropping. And then after that one, we've got, we've got animator Charlie Bonifacio coming up, and we've got a great multi-part interview with the legendary layout artist Ed Gertner, talking about his 45-year career in the business. So there's lots of really terrific interviews coming up, and every week we're going to be dropping new ones. We are going to just have a shortened version of our show for the next 4 weeks. And so with that, go out, have a fantastic week, be kind to one another, and we'll see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.